Good evening. As Don said, my name is Nathanial Totten, and I am a senior at Liberty University, hoping to graduate in the coming months with my undergraduate degree in music and worship studies. And as he said, I am also a member of the LGBTQ community, happily engaged to a kind and, dare I say, handsome man. As you may have inferred, I am not your typical Liberty student. I grew up in a charismatic Assemblies of God family and attended Lutheran Church Missouri Synod schools. So finding a happy medium between the expressive freedom and structured worship was empowering for someone hoping to pursue full-time worship ministry. My time at Liberty has been, at best, complex. The first year and a half were consequential in my spiritual development. As I fell in love with the campus and with the city, my Christian faith iterated from skeptical Pentecostal to neo-reformed apologist. In the wake of the San Bernardino shooting in December of 2015, Liberty's president infamously spoke on our convocation stage, making casual reference to the pistol located in his back pocket. We urged students to apply for concealed carry permits with the hopes our collective firepower would serve as a deterrent against would-be attackers. Headlines would also amplify his implicit reference to violence against Muslims, a clarifying moment for many students that remains as viscerally repugnant now as it was then. Students cheered, applauding his perceived stand against the politically correct establishment, and so continued his plunge into white Christian nationalism, and it would only get worse. In many ways, 2016 represents the hardest period of my brief existence. It was the year I became affirming of myself as a queer person of faith, the year I came out to my family, and the year that my life, as I knew and expected it to be, would completely flip upside down. The social and economic conservatism in which I was raised became untenable as I began to recognize both my privilege as a white cisgendered male and the ways in which I encountered injustice as a non-straight person, particularly within the church and within my school. The presidential election and the intensity with which Trumpism assimilated into the mainstream of white evangelicalism would have radical implications for my spiritual identity. While I maintained a contracted position in a Roanoke megachurch campus, I found a pervasive unwillingness to confront issues of social injustice within the broader white evangelical community. So I slowly disassociated from the evangelical label. I no longer fit in what had always been my spiritual home. I wasn't welcomed for who I really was. These spaces readily included a nonpartisan, straight, sanitized version of myself I had willingly projected in the name of safety, but they couldn't really include me. The best way I know how to describe these experiences is through the act of seeing. My eyes were opened to that which had always been right in front of me, but I saw what I could never, in good conscience, unsee. In the year and a half since, I've come out publicly and started articulating my experiences through writing on a blog and on social media. So I'm here today out of hope for myself, my school, and my faith. It's hope that I can, even in the hurt, lean into my belovedness as a child of God and make sense of a messy, complicated life. It's a hope that my broader faith community is capable of following in the way of Jesus seriously. It's a hope that my school needn't forever be defined by the ills of white Christian nationalism, as demonstrated by a sycophantic leader and a silently complicit administration. I'm also here to say I'm sorry. There are a great many caricatures of liberty that exist in the public imagination, and frankly, many of them aren't too far off base. And while I'm quick to criticize my school on an institutional scale, and Lord knows there's a lot I could say, I'm intimately familiar with the many good and beautiful individuals whose friendships came about in the midst of my own tremendous grief. There are many of us who see deep, sustained problems reinforcing theological and sociological fault lines throughout Liberty University's student body, and even the faculty, though you may hear a lot less about that. Most Liberty students will ultimately see the world and Lynchburg through the lens of privilege. This often manifests in dismissiveness towards the systemic issues that plague the nation and cities like Lynchburg. On issues of racial justice, gender inequality, and sexuality, Liberty struggles as an institution to seriously address these matters apart from an over-spiritualization that centers personal righteousness over and against collective righteousness. It placates the individual at the cost of the vulnerable. Unfortunately, a theology centered on justice remains perceptually tainted by partisanship. In these settings, like Liberty, the universality of justice is reoriented around liberal politics, liberal theology, and the spirit of the Jewish prophets is lost in the vacuum of polarization. It's my personal hope that we can collectively appeal to Liberty students of all stripes, but especially those somewhere in the middle, profoundly uncomfortable with their institution's leadership, yet in love with their community. They have the potential to reform Liberty from the ground up, leading the arduous charge towards lasting repentance. I'm here representing myself and a sizable, if quiet, minority of Liberty students to say this: while there's so much work yet to be done, God is certainly present in and with the student body at Liberty University. It just doesn't always look like it. And while God's work may be hard to see, I'm here to say I've seen some light. I've seen embers. May we yet stoke the flames of a Christocentric Christianity, one that looks, talks, and behaves like Jesus, such that it can begin to redefine Liberty University's campus. And more broadly, may we elevate and set our focus on the imperative of justice, justice for people of color, women, people with disabilities, and LGBTQ people like myself. And may we remember that a Christian view of justice is always intersectional. It starts here. May the infinite love and the peace that surpasses all understanding be with you. Thank you.